everyone, and welcome back to the Shock Absorber podcast. And it is my distinct pleasure to welcome back our regular co-host Tim and Stu. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
How are you?
Good.
Good? Very good? Or just good?
Jolly good.
Jolly good. That is a good word. Have a holly jolly Christmas. We're coming up into Christmas. That's what I thought of as soon as you said that. To start off with this episode, Tim, you've been having a bit of fun with some AI this morning. What have you learned? What has ChatGPT taught you this morning?
Well, yeah, I've been playing around with ChatGPT. Stu and I were playing around with it yesterday, doing lots of bits and pieces, which was really fun. And I was trying to use it this morning at home to create a list of sources. So I said, give me more books on like this kind of topic. And it was spitting out things. One of them came up with an author that I know and a book that I'd never heard of. I'm like, wow, like he's written a book on that. That's great. So then went trying to look for it. It was totally fictitious. It doesn't exist. There's no such book. But the chat, it was within Notion. The Notion AI had given me the author, the title of the book, the publisher, the date that it was published. Like it gave me a full reference for it.
Fake book.
It doesn't exist. Yeah. So I just thought that was really great. The joys and also the struggles with AI that is designed to give you what you want, whether it's true or not. It doesn't. It doesn't care. It's just trying to give you what it thinks you want, which is really interesting. So anyway, we was playing before we started recording on who is Joel McMaster from Soul Revival Church, and it didn't do too badly actually.
Reasonably accurate.
Joel McMaster serves as the digital pastor at Soul Revival Church, an Anglican congregation based in the Sutherland Shire of Sydney, Australia. In this role, he oversees the church's digital initiatives, including their YouTube channel, etc., etc. He hosts the Shock Absorber podcast. Here we are
doing that.
Yes. He discusses topics related to church planning and ministry. He's also appeared on other podcasts, sharing insights on digital pastoring and engaging with young people in the church. What other podcasts are you sharing on?
Well, there's a Chip Lunch one that it doesn't mention, but then I also went on another podcast, which the name escapes me right now. I can find it, where we spoke about becoming a digital pastor and talking about like part-time ministry.
Right.
He got in contact with me and asked me, the Aspire podcast, that's what it's called. And the title is called Joel McMaster on Digital Pastoring, How Young People Often Aren't Listened to in the Church, Friendship is the Foundation of Ministry, and Why Be Authentic in Ministry. So there you go. But it was quite fun. Our friend Aaron, that's right, he got in contact with me and said, can you come on the podcast? And I said, sure, come down to us. And he came on the Shock Absorber actually. And so that was a lot of fun. Anyway.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really fun.
I've used ChatGPT to clean up some. Like I wrote I coach my son's football team and I wrote a review of, we finished summer soccer and I just wrote an end of season message in the WhatsApp chat that we have. It's always an experience. And I just wrote all the points out, I wrote it and then said, can you clean this up and make it better? And then I read it again, edited it again and then sent it. So it's really helpful for that.
That's what we're trying to work out, right? Like, I mean, there's only a couple of years old, this really highly generative AI, large language models, and working out how do you use them? What's the right way of using them? Where is it helpful? Where is it not helpful? We're still playing with that, right? As a whole culture, as society, trying to work out what it is good for. And there are so many tasks that it has potential to simplify, and then there are other things that maybe it is capable of doing, but wondering should we be offsetting some of the high thinking that we're doing, or where does it play? And I know that, Stu, with your PhD research, like trying to find extra sources or, what's going on here, or give me more articles related to this topic. And, there's lots of stuff that it can pump out and do for us. But I know you've been playing around a lot as you try and work out what are the right AI research tools. I don't know if you found anything that's really helpful.
Yeah, there's a lot of programs out there. There's things like Illicit site I use a bit. Grammarly's actually allowed. I've got to keep checking these things because the rules change, but Grammarly's okay to fix your grammar up a bit, but you obviously can't write your PhD with chat.
Can you just write me 100,000 words on this topic, please?
Yeah, that's all right. But I think it's pretty helpful. I mean, I can get an author and say, what are these? What other peer-reviewed articles has this author written, and some of them are right. You just got to go through and check them, but it just speeds up the search process. So it's good.
It seems to take out a lot of grunt work in terms of providing a direction for you to go in. I think that's where
I think so.
At.
Yeah. And if you don't understand a topic or a word, you can say, give me more information about this word, I don't understand it, or what's the historical significance of this particular thing, or who started this idea, stuff like that's really helpful.
That's interesting. But watch out for fake books.
Yeah, a lot of fake stuff.
That's really interesting. You made up a book and a publishing date and everything from that.
Yes. Yep. And I think like one of the things that my wife Roz and I both really enjoyed about studying at university, well before any of this high internet age, was getting lost in the library. And I think that's where some of this might, like trying to work out for myself where this interaction is, because you go looking for a particular, like you've got a title of a book. I know this one is going to be helpful for my assessment. So you search up the catalogue, okay, where is it in the library? And you go and find there. But because of the way the libraries are catalogued, you know, you can see visually, you know, the 20 books to the left and the right that are all roughly on that topic. And you will discover things that may never have turned up. And I think that's, even as I'm doing this as a future project idea that I'm thinking about, but just getting a couple of books that I know are going to be really good. It spat out a few that I'm like, oh yes, no, I've heard of that. Yep, definitely love that one. But then actually be able to go to the Moore College Library at a later date, go to where that book is on the shelf, and then from there see, okay, what is to the left, what is to the right, what are books that ChatGPT would never have spat out, and what else is around there. So you can kind of, you start to get breadth of knowledge. And so I really like that. And that's something that you're never quite going to be able to do on the like it will keep spitting out things that it thinks you want. And there again, there's pros and cons. Like, what are the top 10 books on this topic? What are the top 10 books on whatever? Similar books to X, and it will spit out things. So it'll probably give you the most popular ones, which is good. It might leave off more obscure ones that you would have stumbled across in the library that actually might give you a bit of a breakthrough in particular avenue. So I think it's going to be a back and forth between the digital and the physical world that may be where some of the best thinking and creativity comes from.
There's something in that actually putting in the effort to find things and work it out and grapple with it yourself.
That's right. Yeah.
You said you like going to the library. Just a quick aside, what's your favourite library you've ever been to?
I haven't got that much experience.
I love libraries. That's why.
I mean, there's. I don't really have all that many. In terms of like aesthetics, I did a year's study at the Presbyterian College, and it was the last year that their college was housed in basically renovated squash courts that they had at Burwood. Okay. So that library was really dark and dingy and really pokey, and you're kind of walking in and out of corridors to find all your books. But the year after I'd finished, they had finished building their brand new complex, and so that building is beautiful, and their library on the second or third floor is great. And so because it's purpose built, it's large. So I really like that. The new Moore College Library, when I say new, it's probably maybe 10 years old now, but it's sort of downstairs, but again, it's sprawling and there's lots there. So they're good places. But I do have a Libraries of the World bucket list. We'd love to go with some of those European ones, or Alexandria is amazing, the new Alexandria Library. So there's all places like that would be great to aesthetically just kind of enjoy. Oh, actually, no, now that I remember it, we spent an overnight in Melbourne and went to the Victorian State Library. That is a really beautiful building.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Have you got a favourite one, Stu?
I like the Library of New South Wales. That's
the Mitchell Library. Is it that one?
Called the Mitchell? Yeah.
Oh, the Mitchell. I think that's one of the sections in it.
I love that part. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's like the big open area, and you sit down and write.
But I like, when you walk into a library, it's really quiet, but there's like the smell of books. I think that's the thing I like about it. I went to the National Library in Canberra a few months ago.
I don't think I've done that one.
It felt like quiet, and it's like serious business is happening here, serious books. Anyway, that's what I like about libraries. That's why I was asking the question. Anyway, we were talking about grunt work, and Stu, you are in the throes of a PhD, but you actually read out something. You said, how do you think this sounds? We thought we might ask you to read out some of it on the podcast, because it forms the basis of what we're talking about today, which is the strategy of ministry teams in our framework of theology, strategy, practice. Do you want to share with us what, like, some parts of that you were actually in the middle of writing it right now? It's kind of, we can do a bit of a live edit, and then we can go from there and see what we think.
Yeah, we're also using. So I've made sure I got permission for this, but I'm using some of the text from the podcast of the first season. So some of you will be familiar
of the Shockers,
yeah. So this is part of my chapter 2. Which is called autoethnography, which is kind of like combining biography and ethnography.
Okay.
So you kind of tell your story, then other people tell their stories, and then you compare those stories and you assess them sort of with sociology and then theologically as well. So
okay,
it's pretty fun. All right, this is part of chapter 2. We started considering whether there was another way to think about youth ministry. We wondered how God wanted us to run the youth group. So one night, a group of us got together and sat around a coffee table, and flicking through our Bibles, we were sharing our favourite passages. We came across Matthew 22:37-40, which was a light bulb moment. In that passage, Jesus is asked, what's the most important commandment? His answer was that we are to love God with all our heart and love others as ourselves. That struck us because we were excited about this new youth group, but it was only something we were doing in our spare time, like an unpaid part-time job. We felt that we weren't really loving God with all our heart and giving God the best of ourselves. And as young Gen Xers, the practical application for us at the time was to give God what we enjoyed doing the most. Our most valuable night of the week was our Saturday party night. And we were running Soul Revival on a Friday, but we thought, if we're going to give God our best, why don't we give him Saturday night? We also thought that meeting on Saturday night would be a way to put each other first in a practical way. At that time, Saturday night was reserved for, I think I said that twice. Here's the first edit. We chose our best friend. Oh, that's it. I'm going to leave it there because I'm going to have to edit that more. Hope that was helpful.
It's actually quite fun. My initial reaction to hearing is like, this feels like the very genesis of a ministry that I feel very fond of and very passionate about. And I think it's quite cool to hear, like, that's the very beginning of it, that it came out from a conviction from the Bible too, which is what we talked about with the theological perspective. Tim, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Yeah,
well, I think as you've been reading that out to us, one of the key things I think is really countercultural about the Soul Revival was allowing our church life to influence our social life. And at one level it seems really obvious that, of course, the gospel is going to shape everything.
Yep.
But I think, particularly in that moment, but maybe even today, we're now 30-something years later, that actually our life together outside of church, Bible study, youth leading will actually be shaped by our friendships at church, and to consciously choose that our church friendships are going to be our key friendships, not outside of church, but within the context of that, which in a sort of an open way. And I think that was what's really unique. So it's not unique necessarily for you to have church friends over your place for dinner and a board game, or go out to the movies with a few of them, but they tend to be small, exclusive gatherings. And so you still end up with sort of Christian versions of Friends or How I Met Your Mother or whatever, like those kind of groups where there's 6 or 5 and there's not many beyond that. Seinfeld had the Key Four. And so those kinds of small, intimate friendships, you may also happen to all go to church together and you're pleasant to the other people around. But when you think of your social life, you're just thinking about those small numbers of people that you go and do activities with. What was so groundbreaking about Soul Revival, and Joel and I, both of us, we've sort of grew up in it and sort of didn't know much else really. But for Stu, who's setting this off, and as people come in and out of this and try to experience it, that idea that we are going to meet as friends, but the friendship group is open, the friendship group is inclusive, and anyone who comes along, we will, have as friends. Like, they are our friends. They are friends that come along and be here, and we will give them the time, the attention, the empathy, the friendship that we would give to others that we know better or get along with more, or all those kinds of things. And so I think the inclusive nature of friendship that comes out of that, and one of Institute's little catchphrase we use all the time, that let Jesus choose our friends for us. That I think is really monumental, and a massive shift in the way that has shaped the way we do youth ministry, the way we shape our Saturday night soul revival, and then when we church planted and gathering planning now to do the same thing.
Well, I love that you said that, because it's the thing that I often am getting from when we do this record this podcast is that we are now an established church and have been for 13 years, but so much of what we do were lessons learned in youth ministry. I was just going to ask you, just before I would love you to speak on that. How old were you guys when you came up with that thought, like the genesis of Soul Revival? How old were you and Lou and Ken and Kylie? You remember?
I think I was about 21.
Yeah, I thought
22.
Quite prescient for someone that was only 21, 22. I thought that was pretty cool. So how does that, what you've read out there, how do we make that connection between how Soul Revival started and then what eventually became, we're getting to the point of like our 10 service teams, which you can talk about in the next episode in terms of under practice. But how did you think from that point, and it's a long extension into the future, but how do you think that shaped how we look at strategy for our ministry teams at Soul Revival?
Well, I think put the Bible first and then work out the strategy from the Bible. So the theological context we went through from Romans 12 a little while ago, talking about that the gospel shapes everything we do in our theology, and our strategy that comes from our theology is basically, well, Jesus changes everything. So we've been invited by Jesus to partner with him as he grows the church. So the challenge for us is that we can have fun using our God-given brains to be able to think through what's a strategy of ministry that will be effective or helpful in our context, where we are. And the great thing about the New Testament is it's not prescriptive about the strategy of how we do church. But in Romans 12, there's a really helpful section about being the body of Christ. And as we said last week, that sense of being a body of Christ is also reflected in Paul's writings in Ephesians chapter 4. And so this idea that we're a body seems to me to give us a strategy that we work as a body. So most strategies of ministry have some kind of expression of being a body of Christ. So what we can look at today is the various different kinds of ways people try to be the body of Christ in their area and come up with new ideas to do that.
I think it's quite an interesting way of doing it. So the overarching word that we like to use, or the phrase that we like to use for strategy, is sharing the truth and love of Jesus generation to generation, culture to culture, place to place, and space to space. Did I get all of them? Or have I missed one?
The one of them, which is person to person.
Person to person. Thank you. Thank you very much. Some of the things that I think you were talking about as well from the PhD, or the PhD that you're writing, was that there were a number of light bulb pivotal moments. And I'm wondering that as we talk about strategy, and we sometimes say that churches are often missing strategy, they often skip from the theology part straight to the practice. Do you think there is a desire from other churches, in your experience throughout many 30 plus years of ministry, to do that hard work to find those light bulb pivotal moments to go, this is how we want to run the church?
Yeah, I think the light bulb moments come from just doing ministry together and then talking about it. I often hear Christians reflecting and planning, so they plan ideas and then they reflect on what they're doing. I think a lot of strategies are not articulated necessarily because a lot of churches are quite old and they've been going for a long time. And sometimes there's ministries that are happening in the church, or ways of structuring ministries that have been set down sometimes generations earlier, and the practice continues, but not always the why of what was trying to be achieved in that practice. So I don't think it's a binary situation of people doing that well or badly necessarily. It's everyone's different and everyone does things differently. But I think it's good to reflect on continuing to think and give each new generation the opportunity to contribute to what the expression of church looks like. You mentioned the share the truth and love of Jesus. That's picking up what Paul talks about in Thessalonians when he said, didn't we preach the gospel and share our lives together? And so the idea of sharing the truth and love of Jesus is to preach the gospel and to share our lives together, and actually articulating to do it person to person, generation to generation, culture to culture, and place to place is kind of helpful, because it gives us a holistic framework of thinking as an individual Christian, as a group of Christians, as a generation of Christians, as a group of Christians from a particular culture. There's this opportunity to always embrace otherness rather than just sameness. So if I'm friends with people who are like me at my age, I might be looking out to share the truth and gospel amongst my generation and my friends, but also looking to those who are older and younger, thinking generationally. And we've talked about the fact that the shock absorber gives us a way of doing that, because we actually want to listen to other generations and then share what we have to share. So as younger Christians, younger Christians have a cultural flexibility that they can share with the church. Older Christians have a Christian maturity that they can share with the church. So the strength of the shock absorber comes from the strength of the biblical knowledge of the older generations, and the younger generation bring the vitality and flexibility. So our approach is to be an all-age, all-stage community, and we've lent heavily into the strategy of being a third-place community, which we've talked about a number of times on the podcast. That comes from the book called The Great Good Place by Oldenburg. And Oldenburg talks about the principles of a community where people choose to go, where they're not forced to be there, they're not paid to be there. It's different to the places where they work, which is the second place, and it's different to where they live in the first place. It's a third place. There are Christian churches that use that as a strategy, as an in-between place between the world and the church. And so there's this view from some third place practitioners in the church to have a strategy where the third place theory means that there can be a bridge between the culture and the church, where people who might be unfamiliar with the practices of a church service can meet with Christians in a non-explicit Christian context where people are just being friends, like a cafe is a good example of that. Where some churches start a cafe so people can come to the cafe without actually having to be too confronted by the differences in culture that Christians have these days. However, we've flipped that, where we actually want our third place to be explicitly Christian. And that's because we think that it's really powerful when you read the New Testament that Jesus disciples his disciples privately and publicly, where the crowds can come and be around him. So we see the third place as a place where we can share the truth and love of Jesus explicitly in a community where people come and go, oh, this is how Christians live. And they can be a part of spending time with us, hear what we believe, and then see what difference it makes to our lives. So that helps with discipleship of younger Christians, and it helps with mission to people who aren't Christians. And so that third place, we hope, really facilitates friendships. As Tim was saying, rather than coming to church like we go to the movies with 3 or 4 friends sitting in a darkened room with a big group of people, but being pleasant strangers to everybody else who's there, we actually seek to be friends with our best friends, of course, but also be friends with people who are different to ourselves as well. So as we said before, it's wonderful seeing young people and older people sitting together having a meal together after church. And I think when unbelieving people come, or people who don't believe in Jesus come along and they go, wow, how did that happen? And we say, well, Jesus makes it possible. We don't need anything else but Jesus to be friends. That brings glory to God. That's kind of what I think our strategy is.
I think that's really cool. Tim, you were nodding vigorously and and making lots of noises of agreement. I just would love to hear what you think about that as well.
Yeah, well, I think I was on a podcast this week with the YouthWorks crew talking about incarnational ministry, and we were sort of critiquing incarnational ministry and the idea that you have to go to where your young people are, you need to become like them in some way to earn the right to be heard as a foundation for then telling them the gospel. And I think we were critiquing numbers of aspects of that. One of the things I really like about what Stu just said there is you've kind of got this different strategy, which is to create third places, which is a space where hopefully people do want to hang out, that they do want to come, they can form relationships, you can do all that kind of social, not social work as in caring for the poor, social work as in you're doing the work of being society, community together. But the key difference between that and sort of an incarnational approach is what Stu said about being explicitly Christian as you hang out together. So it's not a soft social community. We're hoping to get people regular enough or going out to them and forming relationships and hoping you can build enough relationships as a precursor to later telling the gospel. It's like, no, come into our space. And we're, as part of our many, many hours spending time together and enjoying each other in community, we will unashamedly, unapologetically, quite confidently open the scriptures and talk about it. And for those who are Christians in the group, as Stu said, you disciple those, you grow them in their knowledge, love and obedience to King Jesus. And for those who have come along and are enjoying the social but still not quite sure what to think of Jesus, they're experiencing not Christian light, they're Christian. This is real Christianity here. This is the people of God learning what it means to be Christians together. And so it's not a bait and switch. It's not I've got to do all this relational work in order to get a precursor, a foundation to then later on hopefully be bold enough to share the gospel with them. It's no, inviting them into a very warm community space. And as a part of what we do there, we will open the Bible and talk about what it's like to be Christians here today. And I just think that is a significant strategic shift that is not, it's not a holy huddle, as Stu talks about this later in his PhD. It's not just sitting and only being Christians together and suspicious when a non-Christian walks in and goes, oh, I don't know how they're going to fit in. So it's not doing that, but it's also not this sort of incarnational model, which is I've got to go out and become like others in order to earn the right to tell them about Jesus. It's maybe not even a middle way, but it's just a confidently Christian in a communal space, third space that people want to be a part of. And as part of what we do there, being confident about being Christians. And it has worked. Part of the story of Soul Revival is that, it started with 4 people in a lounge room. It had ups and downs and swings and roundabouts, as a youth community, young adult community, at our previous church, Guyman Anglican. Now as a church, we are growing, which is great. So I think that sort of shows that we haven't had to do either of those other models. This is a significant strategy. It's distinctive. We can name it, we can notice it, we can think about the theological and strategic application of it. We believe it's reproducible, and we've tried to help others with that as well.
Stu, when it comes to that strategy of what we're talking about and sharing the truth and love of Jesus, as we said, generation, person to person, generation, culture to culture, place to place and space to space, has there ever been some pushback in terms of that won't work? And like that, Tim was saying, it has worked, but some people might say it won't work because you're not targeting a particular audience or a particular group of people or demographic. What would kind of what would your response be to that, besides me just saying, well, it has actually worked? I think it'd be helpful to kind of think through why such a broad strategic mission or strategic approach actually does seem to be an interesting way to actually think about the strategy of church.
I think it is, you're right, some people would suggest that spending more time together takes people away from other things. When you choose to do one thing, you choose to not do other stuff, even if you consciously don't do that. I think that what I think we're trying to achieve with friendship is we don't see what we do at church as an event so much as a community, and so we gather together in the name of Jesus around his word and we preach the gospel, and it's the gospel that changes people. when they hear it and accept it. And living it out together is great, and it reinforces relationship. So rather than just doing things really well, we actually like to lean into that long-term, low-key relational aspect of what friendship is all about. But people can be a little bit frustrated by that or a bit challenged. Actually, one time when we were describing how Soul Revival is an open friendship group, one of the young people came up to me and said, I feel like that's very exclusive for you to say that. And I said, really? How can being an open friendship group be exclusive? And this person said, well, if you exclude me, you exclude me from that because I want to be exclusive. So I want to have an exclusive friendship group. So if you have an open friendship group, I'm excluded from your group. And I still don't have an answer to that, but it was surprising. I didn't expect it. So there are downsides of it. And again, actually in the PhD, I've got a section on how our approach to friendship did lead to a bit of conflict. Do you want me to read a little bit of this? And your approach to friendship led to a bit of conflict right from the beginning. Spending Saturday night together meant that we said no to other social gatherings. While Louise and I would go to 21st engagement parties and weddings, we often knocked back other invitations to see a band, hang out at the pub or go away for a weekend because we chose to prioritise Soul Revival. Some of my friends did not understand why I was spending so much time with my church friends and those young crew. They would become frustrated and cynical of us taking church too seriously. They commented that we were becoming prudish because we weren't drinking on a Saturday night because we were hanging out with underage young crew who were there as well. It was not that we were consciously rejecting our friends who did not want to come to Solies, but one of them once said to me, as I just said earlier, by choosing one thing, you're choosing not to do something else. And even our family sometimes felt that we were putting church first before the family events that were running. So, yeah, I think the difficult part of it is trying to delve into deeper relationships at church means that costs you other things. But we used to see ourselves as being missionaries in Sutherland Shire, and we thought to ourselves, if we were in Afghanistan being a missionary, we wouldn't be able to go to all the parties every week and we wouldn't be able to spend as much time with all our friends. So while we tried to keep our friendships going, we didn't want to just spend our weekends on an endless cycle of 21st and, parties. And, back in my day, we had parties for everything, include someone wash their dog, they'd have a party. So if you turn down a party, I was like, oh, aren't we friends anymore? Because I don't think it's the same these days. I'm still trying to get my head around it. But for Gen Xers, if you didn't go to a party, then you were kind of dissing someone a bit.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, I think that's my impression. I don't know what other people think. But yeah, by us saying, let's do this, though, we were having a lot deeper relationships with ourselves as leaders and with the young crew. And we're spending more time with each other, which actually led to more mission, because I think particularly for Gen Xers who grew up under the first generation to grow up under no-fault divorce, 50% divorce rates, there was a lot of insecurity and transience in their family life. And to have this kind of constancy of a community of people that were really committed to Jesus and committed to each other was a super encouraging thing. And as Soul Revival did grow, it grew from 4 kids to 500 kids in 7 years. And 80% of them were people who became Christians. It wasn't transfer growth. So, yeah, I think there's something to that relational aspect to what we're doing, which will inform our strategy for teams. Because instead of people just going on rosters to get the event to happen and getting burnt out in the process, they're actually joining a friendship group who are actually working together as friends to pull off something together. So while in the world people will be friends and go surfing together, we run youth group together. That's what we do as friends. It's kind of our fun thing we do. Or we play music together at church, and but it's always got to be an open community. It can't be closed. We can't be sectarian. So we always need to make sure that we have good relationships with other churches, and we also have really open relationships with other people outside the church, but still put a priority on committing to the ministry that we're doing in the local church. And that's the balance I think we've learned over the years to get better at.
Well, as you read out that second part of your PhD, and that it did cause a bit of conflict and with friends, family members and those kind of things. But I think what I get out of that is that it was quite explicitly countercultural. And I think that's what you're talking about, Tim, too, isn't it? It's that these decisions and choices they make are explicitly Christian, but also explicitly countercultural. Do you want to speak to that a bit?
Yeah, and countercultural also to Christians. So it's not just that it's countercultural to the world, which we should expect the gospel to be. So a gospel-shaped life, a Christ-shaped life will be countercultural to the world around us. But this level of commitment and prioritization was also countercultural to the way that many Christians were living, probably still are living now, in terms of that I'm going to prioritise this time. And I think what's really interesting, and this may have led to part of the missional aspect of Soul Revival, was it was a commitment, it was a priority. This is what I do on a Saturday night, and you can come along if you want. So when someone at work gives you an invite, if you have if you got a D&D campaign, it's the same 6 people every fortnight on a Friday, and you go and play this with the same 6 people, and you've got this campaign. That's not an open invite. You actually, by design, you can't invite someone else into that space because they'd have to sit on the side and watch, which would just be boring. They can't suddenly pick a character. It's not how the game works. At least that's my understanding. I don't play it. My son does. But it's, there's a lot of these kind of exclusive kind of, when we hang out together and, that's my night when I get together with this group of people. So sorry, I can't come to your thing, and also you can't come to my thing. So we've got these sort of things. So both sides of this, it's interesting the things we prioritise. And some of that conflict comes out of, but why would you prioritise church to that extent? Like, you're taking it a bit too seriously, aren't you? That you would actually, church is one of those things that can come and go depending on what else is on, right? And we're saying, well, no, it's not. And not just church on a Sunday, but in these early days, it wasn't church on a Saturday night. It was something else on a Saturday night. So we're saying, no, I'm blocking out my Friday night for ministry, my Saturday night for this community, and also my Sunday night usually for church. And all of those things are immovable objects on my calendar. And so when someone from work or school or university says, hey, would you like to come and hang out? You say, oh, well, I can't on this time either. Why don't you come and hang out with me? Because it's an open invite. Anyone can come along on a Saturday night. I don't know if I'd really want to come and hang out with a whole bunch of Christians. Oh, you might be surprised. Why don't you just come and check it out for a bit? And if you don't like it, you go walk up the road to the pub. But also it gives you the opportunity to say, oh, this is a priority. And so I can't do that. What if we did brunch on a Sunday? Or what if we did lunchtime? Maybe my Thursday night is free, or, it gives other things. But everyone has immovable priorities. We're just putting our church friendships into one of those immovable categories. If I said to, like we talked about last week, what we do for Christmas, I'm not doing much for Christmas. So if I invited someone over to my house for Christmas lunch, and they said, oh no, so I've got family stuff on, I mean, it'd be pretty silly for me to get grumpy at that, because it's Christmas Day, most people are hanging out with their family. I'm not going to get grumpy, because the McMasters can't come to my place for lunch. That would be silly of me, because I know that there's a priority there. And so, but that's an example of an immovable object. Like, we have immovable things in our diary. This is the radical shift in my mind of what Stu and the other pioneers did, was to say our church friendships are one of those immovable objects. It's one of the things that is just locked in our diary. It takes a remarkable thing for it to move. And Stu mentioned some of those remarkable things, weddings, probably only happen once in someone's lifetime. To go and celebrate with them, that's a pretty significant thing. But a night at the pub, that happens most weeks, that happens most nights. There's lots of other opportunities to go and do that.
That's right.
And so, you're trying to work out, this is immovable most of the time. I think that is that subtle shift, which again, you and I, Joel, have kind of grown up into and almost unquestionably assumed. And we also both now see it in our kids as well. My daughter gets an invite to a birthday party on a Saturday night, and she's like, okay, so if I go early to the party, then I can make it back for church. Oh no, that might not work. But if I do church and hang out till 8:30 and then doing a sleepover, maybe I can go afterwards. And she's still at an age where she hasn't quite worked out that missing church between 5 and 8:30 on a Saturday night is one of the things that could move. For her, it's just, that's immovable. I know that I do that. And she wants to, she's not being forced to. It's an active choice on her behalf to prioritise that time. And so when other invites come in, she goes, okay, well, I've got to negotiate it knowing that I need to be, I'm definitely going to be at church 5 till 8:30. Okay, what else can I move around? And I just think that's, for me, is that big shift.
It is a big shift. And I think like all these things we're talking about are kind of big shifts, and you talk about the pivotal moments in your PhD, which is really interesting, Stu. But we're talking about third place community, being explicitly Christian, doing it together as friends, and it's, as a result, it is countercultural to even perhaps Christian circles, not just the world outside Christians. How does that translate, though, Stu, to how you think about ministry teams?
Okay, so there's lots of different ways of doing ministry teams, and it's usually based on efficiency, I think.
Okay.
Or what is considered to be theological or biblical and efficient. There are lots of ways to improve efficiency in churches, and that's a good thing because there's computers and there's all sorts of different
tools,
clever tools and ideas. But what we've done that is a bit different is we've started with, let's see doing ministry together as a relationship rather than seeing doing ministry together as a task to be done or a duty. And so a lot of people find it hard to get their head around that. So we actually invite people onto ministry teams to be friends. So we think about our ministry team at church as what Oldenburg would call the regulars. And so people who are the regulars set the culture and they set the vibe, and they're there to help other people understand what's happening and, you know, do everything that's necessary to help run the community. And by being open, it gives new people an opportunity to join that group of regulars. But the church will always have a group of regulars and irregulars in third place theory. So the irregulars need to be able to opt in or opt out of that regular space. So to help people to be regular, we have two things. We have Bible studies, which we call community groups, and we also have service teams. And the service teams, we have 10 of them. And unlike some other church models, the pastors don't actually run those. They're actually run by volunteers. Again, according to Ephesians 4, that says pastors raise up ministers for the gospel. So we do allocate a pastor to each of the service teams to support and encourage and get stuff done when the volunteers don't have time to do it. But it's not their main job. The main job for the pastor is to be a generalist pastor, to be the pastor of a gathering. So we have a pastor of a gathering who also has another hat on to look after one or two service teams, but to raise up central coordinators to look after those teams across the whole church. And in each gathering, each of the gatherings has a gathering coordinator for each of those ministries. And it does sound very structured, but actually in effect what we're trying to do is there's 10 service teams, so we're trying to raise up 10 regulars within the gathering that can be a group of friends that can be ministering across these 10 different service teams, building groups of friends within the service teams. So a good example is the arts team, which we call our music ministry. Within the arts team, we say, yeah, we are getting together to play music at church and to preach and to read the Bible and to pray and to do the sound desk and the proclaim and all that stuff. But we're actually coming together to model what it is to be a Christian disciple and how we're discipling one another as we do those things. And we're committed to each other as a group of friends. We're not just on a roster and only go to church when we're on the roster. We're actually trying to create a group of friends that's connected to the rest of the church. So in that way, we've when things are working well, we have about 70 to 80% of people doing something at church, actually being a servant, coming along to actually serve and build up and edify the church using their giftedness. And we have 10 service teams rather, because there's such a multiplicity of different giftedness within the people of God. So we try and give people a real creative mix of different things to do. So that's our different approach to the strategy of service teams.
Well, the thing I was just typing there because I wanted to make this point when I was hearing you talk. You started with sometimes ministry teams are organised by efficiency, but something that we've also been talking about how lessons we learnt from youth ministry was we'll hang out as leaders and as Christians and around the gospel, and then whoever God brings along is fantastic. And I think that is perhaps maybe the biggest lesson we've learned. It's the same with the ministry teams, isn't it? Is that we're going to lead together, whether it's arts or we call it there's hospitality or many of the other 10 service teams we have. But it's like we're going to be together as a group of friends and leaders first, and then whoever is here, we can love and serve them at the same time.
And that's reflected in our team meetings. So some people who are very task focused can sometimes get a bit frustrated by our soul revival meetings because we have a lot of fun and we have a joke around and we're building a relationship with each other as well as getting stuff done. Sometimes we don't get the balance right, and I tend to go towards the relational end of the meeting spectrum. But I think when people come on and they say these meetings are, what did we achieve? And I'm like, well, we all got to know each other better and we got to encourage each other, and we heard so-and-so say they're having a bit of a hard time, and we're just doing life together as well as actually getting this job done.
Mm-hmm. And that maybe is also a result of something that we talked about on a number of previous episodes, is the professionalisation of ministry that, Tim, and I'd love you to jump in on this, but that professionalisation of ministry means that we're only efficiency-based, we're only task-orientated. But I think that kind of misses a little bit of what the gospel, and we talk about partnering with Jesus and what he's doing in the church. Perhaps if we focus too much on that, we're missing the love part of the gospel, which is to take care of one another first. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, so I think it's good to recognise that efficiency is a particular cultural value that is particularly contingent to a post-industrialised world. That was really significant for getting factory work going. Henry Ford was a massive, that kind of movement of getting the production line going. That was an efficiency measure. And so you've got a lot of these kind of efficiency metrics coming out of industrialisation, work plants, factories, those kinds of things. You got the image of the guy with his little stopwatch saying how long does it take to make a car, or how long does it take to bend a paperclip, and if we just make a little tweak here, we can make this X number of paperclips more than we did before, and that kind of efficiency then gets taken up by sort of management companies, and so now you've got efficiencies in all sorts of things, and a lot of the sort of self-help productivity books and things, and Joel, I know you and I both kind of, read a bit of those or listen to podcasts, but so much of that is about how to do things more efficiently. And it's just good to recognise that it's not a biblical value. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just to notice it's not going to be there because it's not a first century value. It's something that is culturally contingent on where we are in the West because of that. And therefore that allows us to just open up with open arms. What's the phrase? Put it open-handed. We can externalize and say, okay, well, let's investigate. Is efficiency actually is it biblical? Well, in the strictest sense, no, it's not in the Bible. Can it be defended theologically? Like, are there aspects of the Christian gospel? Are there aspects of Christian values that we can kind of see in there? And I think that there are certain things that you can say, well, yes, like we want to do our best, and best is kind of a loose term. How do you define best?
Work as unto the Lord, for example.
Work unto the Lord, yeah, that's right. And but again, we kind of then circle back to, best is therefore most efficient. Well, no, not necessarily. Seeing best and efficient as equal to each other, again, that's where we realise, that's a particularly Western post-industrial way of seeing the world. Maybe best also means slow. Maybe best means relational. Maybe best means not throwing people behind the bus, but actually bringing them on into the boat with you and, paddling along with them and giving them an oar every now and then, even if they can't do it really well.
Or if they disagree.
Or if they disagree, like, that's okay.
On the dragon boat, as you were saying.
The dragon boat from last week, even if sometimes they're paddling in the wrong direction.
The most important part of the dragon boat.
Most important part, yeah. I mean, yes. Yep.
I like the drum bit, though.
The drum, yeah.
Thanks. I know what to get you for Christmas, Stu.
A dragon.
Drum.
A dragon and a
dragon
drum.
and a drum.
We're on the dragon boat.
Tally ho.
I think that fits with the dragon
Paddle
boat.
away.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, that's all right. I've got no idea what I was saying, but I think that I've probably said enough. So questioning efficiency, and I just think efficiency can lead us to some solutions that may actually be counter-Christian. And I remember a little blog post, actually I think it was a small editorial many years back. Matthias Media here in Sydney used to publish a magazine called The Briefing. And I'm pretty confident it was Tony Payne, had a brief little editorial in the front. The thing that sticks with me, he says, he was reflecting on the lost sheep, Jesus, the shepherd leaving behind 99 to go after the one. And Tony Payne's reflection was, that's really inefficient. Like, why? That's not cost, benefit, worth it. Why go after one when you've actually got 99 really good ones? 99% is a really good success rate. And so he kind of just riffed a little bit on this idea that actually going after the one is not efficient, but it is Christian. It is God's character. It is Jesus' character. And it was just, it stuck in my mind because it was a really early example to me of questioning whether efficiency is a good metric for Christian ministry, because the slowness, the deliberateness, the relational aspect of going after one when you've actually got 99 pretty good ones that are fine and safe in the pen, just kind of throws a spanner in that and helps us to think about different values and different metrics for what does best look like. What does success look like in the church? It's going after the one when the 99 are fine. So there's effort, there's time, there's relational capacity to do something. So when a pastor puts aside a whole lot of really efficient metrics to go and have a long coffee with someone, and that takes up the entire day because that particular sheep needs looking after, it's not efficient. It's not a good use of that pastor's time according to a lot of the metrics that we put up. But it is Christ-like. And I just think that playing with those ideas, I think helps us to see what do we do well as a church, what does good look like, those kinds of bits and pieces. And so to come back to Soul Revival, I think we have values like long-term, low-key relational discipleship. And I think that expresses some of this, that there is a slowness sometimes. It's relational. Relationships take time. They're messy. They're fraught with highs and lows and anxieties and broken hearts and frustrations and having to bear with one another's burdens because their burdens are really heavy, and all of this kind of messiness of actual life. And I think that the strategies that we're trying to put in place help to hold those up as values that we're aspiring towards and we're working towards.
And I think if, as you're saying, if the leaders are doing it, then people within the congregation and see the service teams or the ministry teams doing that as well, it builds on itself, is what
Absolutely.
I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Here's my final question. If someone is interested in this and they hear about some of the ideas even you're saying, Tim, that it may be better to slow down, it might be better not to be as efficient and professional and those kind of things, how, Stu, do you think you could go about making a shift from perhaps going to a more relational idea of ministry teams, like starting with we're friends together at first because of Jesus, and then we can do ministry after that, rather than just, we're just on a roster and we turn up when we're rostered. Like, how would you make that shift amongst the leadership? Because, you've probably got experience in doing that.
Yeah, it's $1 million question. I think you've got to let Christians understand what we're aspirationally trying to achieve, and then give them permission to join if they want to, or still do ministry at a less relational level if they want to. So we have an hour service, and then we have coffee and dinner or breakfast either side of the services, and that gives people an opportunity to go, actually, I don't want to dive into all this commitment and all this community and all this relationship. I just want to go to church. So we give people an opportunity to be regular and to be part of the community on the edge of it, and not come too regularly. But we also want to try and build for the people who are committed to being regular the opportunity to serve in a relational space. So the simple answer to the question is, I've tried to do that through spending time with the people I minister with socially, hence the Saturday night, and have meetings. So the meetings are, you come together and talk about it together. And I approach meetings differently to a business where the board of directors would sit and talk about things, and there'd be action points, and everyone writes down what needs to be done. They go away and do it and come back and report on it. I mean, there's a place for that kind of stuff, and we do a bit of that. But I like thinking about the fact that our meetings are more like two things I've read about in the past. One is L'Abri in Switzerland in the 1950s and 60s, where people would come together and spend hours talking about what is it to be a Christian.
It's Francis Schaeffer.
Francis Schaeffer, yep. So that, I think, is a terrific model of leadership, because the team can talk about the values and the culture of what they're trying to do, as well as just talking about the activities that they're doing. The second one, which might surprise you, is Berkeley in the 1960s and late 1950s, because the students got together and felt like they didn't have free speech on the campus, and so they'd have these meetings that they'd come to, and they'd go all night. They'd just sit around meeting and talking, how are we going to do this? And there's something joyful and exciting about being part of something that's bigger than yourself. And to come together to try and say, how can we change the world, is a bit more exciting than saying, how can we run this event efficiently? Yeah, right. And then go home because we've got something else to do. Now, I'm not suggesting church meetings should go all night, although I'm quite renowned for going to Macca's after the meeting's finished, and anyone who wants to come stay till 11:30 still talking about what we've been talking about. But yeah, I think those two aspects for me help clearly articulate how people can start seeing it differently, that we're a group of mates who are, when people go surfing, they go and check the surfer most of the time. I don't know if other people have experienced that, but I've gone surfing with friends on a road trip and spent so many hours checking out different spots and comparing them to the other spots, but that's part of the fun. And then you find somewhere and you go surf there because that's better than everywhere else. That was time before the internet maybe, but the journey is important. The training sessions for the netball team are just as important as the actual game day. Why don't we value some of that stuff? And come back to what you were saying earlier, that priority thing. You wouldn't say to someone who is a mad keen Cronulla Sutherland Rugby League fan, oh, come to my place. Oh, we're going up the pub on Sunday night on game day with a home game for the Sharks, because they know that their friend would go to the Sharks. And so, yeah, when people understand that it's just important to that person, I think that's a really valuable witness. So if Christians sometimes go, actually, I'd love to come with you, but I'm actually really excited about church on Sunday morning. I'd love you to come one day, see why I'm so excited about it. I think it's a different, more casual and confident way to evangelise. I think if we're seeing that the church is where the action is, we'll be more confident to ask non-Christian people to come and be where the action is. But if we think the action's outside the church, we will see things like team meetings or structures or service as a duty and a requirement that stops me doing something I'd rather be doing.
Do you think that is
possibly?
Yeah, I think, and maybe Tim, you can answer this too. Do you think there's also this, perhaps a thing, and you talked about the fear of being amateur last week. Is there a fear, do you think, of like church, it can't be the most important part of people's week, that immovable object, that it can't be, we're scared to
There's
make
maybe
it.
something wrong with that.
It's unnecessary way to think or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot of factors coming in. For some people, church is necessary evil. Like, it's an obligation. I've got to go. And I mean, Stu, you've told the story before about being on the sideline of soccer and one of your non-Christian mates going, oh, why do you guys even go? You obviously hate it. And I'm like, what do you mean I hate it? It's like, well, every time you talk about it, it's like, oh, I have to go to church. And so sometimes we have like that. We have that attitude of, oh, I've got to go to church. I'd actually rather come with you to the Sharks game, but I have to go to church because I'm rostered on something, so I guess I should go. Rather than a really positive, oh, that sounds awesome what you're doing. But I mean, I've got my church man and I love it. And actually there's, I find it life-giving. I don't know. There's probably less cheesy ways of saying it, but those kinds of, like, actually be really positive about it. So there is that. Part of that might be a little bit of a cultural cringe. I know a lot of the 90s, I don't know what their 2020 equivalent is, but in the 90s we talked about, it's the Ned Flanders version of, I don't want to seem like Ned Flanders, because for all of his good points, he's an absolute dork, and there's no way I'd want to be.
I love that word. We should bring it back.
Dork.
Dorcas.
Dorcas. There's, we don't want to be that. So there's a cultural cringe, there's embarrassment, there's an obligation factor. And I think part of it is also this disconnect between my church life and my social life. That I do this task of going to church and my social life is over here. And again, I know another big piece of the early soul revival story was looking at the youth ministry and seeing that the way the youth leaders talked about their Friday night ministry was, we're here to look after the kids, we'll do that for 2 hours. Oh, but can you believe who's playing at the pub this week? The Angels are back. And so the action was outside the church. And again, another key part of what Stu has done is said, no, let's talk about the church. Let's talk about actually inside the church. So it's not like, I'll come to church and I'll do my thing and I'll listen to the sermon, I'll have my cup of coffee and my milk arrowroot biscuit, and then, have you checked out the surf? How good is it going to be to hit the waves once church is finished? How good is it going to be to go down to the golf course once church is over? And I might have to clock off a bit early. Can someone else lock up because I've got to get down and hit the green? Or whatever it might be, that the action is outside. And it's really intentional to say, part of that prioritizing is actually because it's a good thing. Like, I want to be here. This is where my friends are. We're all prioritizing this together. I think that's really key, and that builds our commitment. And there's also a lot of talk at the moment on different spheres about why hardness is good for you. The discomfort is good, and so it does build. It builds our I don't know what kind of muscle it is, a psychological muscle, a choice muscle, to keep saying, this is what I'm doing. This is my priority. I'm putting off other things here. I am sacrificing other things, and it's a joy.
It's fun.
And it's fun. I love it. And seeing that, because this is one of the ways in which we're expressing the kingdom of God. And I think back to the parable that Jesus told about the pearl of great price, that this guy found the pearl and he then, in his joy, sells everything he has in order to gain the pearl. Now, Jesus is talking about the kingdom of God, which, an important aspect, an essential aspect of that is your salvation. But the kingdom is also much broader than that. It's also your experience within the realm of God's reign, which is expressed by your community. So it's also like your time at church is part of the kingdom. Like it's part of that joy. It's your salvation is essential. You can't be part of the kingdom unless you're personally saved. So it's atonement based, absolutely, but it's also community expressed, and so that's really, really key as well. So yes, I give up bands, sports matches, hanging out with friends, going down to pubs, all these other things that I could be doing. I'm sacrificing those. In our joy, we are giving up those things for what we know is far better. And I think that bringing church into that, normally we talk about that parable as being a kind of a salvation moment, a conversion moment. But in Jesus' teaching, the kingdom of God must include that, and it's much bigger than that. It's the forever reign of Jesus, which starts now and enters into eternity. And so seeing church as part of the joy that we are setting aside other things for in order to attain, I think that's another really key aspect of what we're doing.
No, I was just sharing with you guys before we started recording that 2 weeks ago I didn't go to church because we had a work Christmas party for my other work. But then we ran our carols event on the next Saturday night, and I was saying I feel like I haven't been to church for ages because
it's 2 weeks.
but it's 2 weeks, man. I'm like I'm desperate to get back because I just.
Whereas the metric that NCLS use, that Barna use in the US, is regular church attendance is once a month. So you're doing fine, in terms of that regular. But we're saying that's, in terms of doing demographic studies, sure, maybe. But that's not our life. Our life together is the key thing.
And one of the keys too of like making that shift away from professionalization is you're saying, and I think you're both saying this, is the key to it is bringing the action back inside the church.
Yep.
And when you're in a service team, you're actually bringing the action. You're not just running some mundane kind of thing. Yeah. I think too that when you look at bringing the action into the church, I think it's not saying there's not other fun stuff to do, and we get really binary, like, oh, if you'd say that, you can't do that. I mean, you can keep living your life, and doing lots of fun stuff, going on holidays and things like that. But yeah, prioritising church, because I was just thinking about what you two were saying, and I was thinking if a family only got together once a month, that'd be okay. There's no strategy. There's nothing strategically wrong with that if you're a family to only have a meal together once a month or see each other as a family once a month, but you wouldn't be very close. But if you see each other for dinner every night, then you're very close. So that's a priority for some families to meet daily and to live in the same house. And for church, it's like once a week. Sounds like a lot to modern busy people, but it's, if you're only meeting with your family once a week, you probably wouldn't be that close with each other, actually, because spending time with each other is really valuable.
And the professionalisation piece, that makes sense of the logic of church if church is an event. It doesn't make a lot of sense if church is a friendship group, even if it's a third place. Like, what does a professional friendship group look like? That's weird. What does a professional Christmas dinner with your family look like? I mean, it's weird to think in that terms. Like, well, catered maybe, but what is professional dining service or sitting arrangement like? You bring professionalisation into community and bring it into a family meal. It just all of a sudden you feel, oh, that's kind of weird actually, because it's not. Now, that doesn't mean that someone in your family gets really excited about a new recipe and they've practiced it and they're in their joy, they are bringing a really great meal to the dinner table. Great. They are bringing expertise, they're bringing excellence, they're bringing time and sacrifice and are joyfully sharing something that they're really excited about to the family meal. But that's different to professionalising the event, because family meals are not an event, or they shouldn't feel like it. And then, again, at Christmas time, you sometimes have those families that kind of feel like, oh, I've just got to put through, my family dinner. Oh my goodness, it's such an event. You realise that there's no joy there when you feel like it's an obligation you have to go to. Whereas if it's a joy-filled community, and this is where sort of Oldenburg's characteristics of being levelers, being neutral places, it's low profile, the mood is playful, like all of these kind of characteristics of third place, you can't professionalise that. Actually, to professionalise that is to rob it of all the things that makes it what it is. And so it is a very different shift, and any kind of aspect of professionalisation doesn't mean you're not trying to do well. So you are still trying to do well. Like it still matters if the band is on tune. It still matters, if the food is cooked and not raw. There are still things that are you do well, but not because it's a professional event. You're doing it well because you love the people you're with. And it also means if you love the people you're with and someone pulls out the chicken and it's still a bit raw in the middle, you just go, that's all right. Hey, we're cool.
Microwave.
Chuck it back in the oven. We can sit around for 30 minutes. What does it matter? We weren't on time because of it's a catered event. We're a community hanging out. If it's going to take half an hour longer, then it takes half an hour longer because we're a family. What does it matter?
Because if you base church on efficiency, then that brings a lot of conflict as well, because people are always arguing whether it's being done well enough. And you're letting me down, or this, I've done all this and this is happening. There's
pressure, there's time commitments, there's all these things.
All that stuff.
I was cooking dinner last night. I was trying to make this baked quiche frittata thing, and it just didn't work. I don't know why. What wrong with it? It put it in for twice as long as it should have. It still wasn't cooked.
Oh, no.
In the end, I just had to scoop it into a fry pan and just cook it up. So the eggs were actually cooked. It was this sloppy mess. But we had no other time commitments. There was nothing the kids were racing off to. End of term. There's not many things going on. And so I served dinner like 30 minutes after we thought it would be ready. No one cared. No one was stressed. And it was a complete mess. It looked nothing like it should have. No one cared because it's a family. And I think if we bring some of that into the way we do church, we'll see this kind of shift. We'll see that change from it's an event that has to be professionalised and efficient to it's a community where we're just appreciating each other and joyfully engaging with each other. And the time, therefore, matters as well.
There's a great ad on TV at the moment about that, where a family does Christmas efficiently and the mother sends out this message to the adult son and her daughter-in-law, bring the turkey and a gravy boat. And so they misinterpret it and make a boat that looks like a gravy boat. And they've got the turkey, and they come into shore, and everyone doesn't care about them, they just care about the turkey. And then they jump off the boat because it starts to rain. He's holding the turkey up, and he walks in, and they're both wet, and they put the turkey on the table, and everybody just devours it, and they don't even get any turkey, and they're just looking there going, oh. So I think that's a really fun ad for people to look up, which is a description of sometimes how we do church. Bring the music. And you can have the joy sucked out of it if there's not relationship as well.
You weren't on time. You came in late.
Yeah. Oh, that song
you stuffed
went on
up
too
that
long.
intro.
You know, you're performing instead of leading us in service, and all these subjective things.
We had this moment in church a couple of weeks ago where the person leading the music tried to start, got it wrong. Tried to start again, got it wrong. Kind of got a bit anxious. Said, sorry, can someone just pray for me because I'm feeling really chaotic in my mind? And so someone else jumped up and just sort of thanked God for the service and the sermon that we just heard, pray for the music we were about to sing, jumped down, started again. It was fine. We were all sang together. And but that, if you were striving for perfectionism, if you were striving for professionality, because this was an event, that would be a highly embarrassing moment. From my perspective at least, I felt like it was a really joyful family moment.
And there's that gentleness.
There's a real gentleness there.
It's like that moment at that big concert that was in England, and the guy couldn't remember his lines and the crowd sang it for him.
Right.
Comes up on my YouTube every now and again.
Yeah.
I'll look it up for next week. I can't remember what it is. It's pretty cool. And he can't sing it because he's got some mental health issues or something. The crowd sings for him.
It's Lewis Capaldi, isn't it?
It might be it.
Is it Lewis Capaldi?
Well, it's a pretty famous song.
Yeah.
I can't remember it.
Might be.
Okay,
But the other thing I want to say just to finish is I don't want us to come across like we've got it all together or we know what we're doing. I think this is really aspirational for our church as well as for other churches, that we have all these same conflicts. We're not sitting here looking at the rest of the world saying we've got it right and no one else knows how to do it and we're trying to compare. It's more like as we look at the Christian church around the world, there's a lot of freedom to try new things, and it's okay to compare ourselves to other things to get a reference point and to just ask ourselves the questions, what are some of the goals that we've got? What are the strategies that we want as a church? And I hope listening to this podcast, rather than telling people how to think, I hope it frees people to think creatively in their context of their own strategies.
Yeah.
So
just sparking thought.
That's it. By all means, cherry pick any of the things we do that might be helpful, but I really hope it encourages creativity at the local level.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that's one of the main reasons we do this podcast, is to get the conversation going, not to be prescriptive, as we said before, but to describe what we do and then say, we'd love to talk to you more about it if that's what you're interested in. So, yeah, that's really cool. Thank you, Stu. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Joel.
Some great contributions. Thank you for your passion and insight. I really appreciate it. Find it invigorating. So thank you. That will wrap it up for today. The Shock Absorber podcast. Next week we will be talking about practice of service teams and how Revival structures service teams, how we make that happen, but then also how other churches maybe do that and how that may differ a little bit. But if you do have any comments or questions, you can contact me at joel@shockabsorber.com.au or drop a comment on our YouTube channel. We'd love you to get engaged with us. And for that being said, we'll wrap it up and say one way.
One way.
One way. Thanks.